Hey everybody, thanks for joining us today. Welcome to our latest webinar, Cybersecurity Secret Sauce, SWICKtech's recipe for complete protection. We're happy to have you, and thank you so much for taking time out of your schedules and busy day to join us today. So we'll jump into some intros and some housekeeping items before we get into the full presentation. Let me just get my slide to change here. There we go. A little bit about SWICKtech and who we are. SWICKtech has been around for 15 years. Last year was our 15th year in business. We have about 30 employees. We're located in New Berlin, Wisconsin, and we do IT support for businesses throughout the Midwest, mid-sized businesses, all the way up to enterprise businesses, some small, some publicly traded, some not. Really, we focus on we provide help desk support. We focus heavily on cybersecurity. It looks like I have a timer on here. Strategic planning for IT, and we really focus on the Microsoft stack. So if you deal with Microsoft Office 365 or Microsoft Teams or Teams Voice, as well as Microsoft Azure, those are some areas we're very strong and passionate about and knowledgeable about. And we also focus heavily on backup and disaster recovery. So just a couple things to talk about who we are and what we do. Today, myself, Eric Clark, one of our client success associates at SWICKtech, will be co-presenting with Shane Kroening, another client success associate at SWICKtech. I do want to take a second to just go over some of those housekeeping items. So if you have any questions throughout the webinar, please feel free to post them to the Q&A chat. We won't call you out specifically, so don't be alarmed there. But as long as your question is relevant to the topic at hand, we'll do our best to get to it. Keep in mind there may be a 30-second lag or so we might not get to it immediately, but we'll find breaks where we can. If there's issues with internet or interruptions from toddlers or dogs or whatever, please bear with us. We are still working from home, and there will be a full Q&A at the end of the presentation. So again, thank you for being here today. We'll go ahead and get started, and hopefully this timer thing won't goof me up too much. So the question I like to ask everybody normally for participation, and you can feel free to put your answer into the Q&A. But I like to ask the question, is cybersecurity one word or two? Can all learn something here today? So I've seen it as one, I've seen it as two, I've seen it with a hyphen in between. And the answer is both. You just got to pick one. So kind of like putting a period or not at the end of bullet points. You just have to pick one way to do it and stay consistent. So it is actually both, technically speaking. And as we dive in, I just, look at the internet and aggregated some intel coming from Google to show all of the various questions that search engines are picking up on from users across the country about cybersecurity. Why is it a problem? What is it specifically? When has it started? There's all sorts of questions around this. There's a lot of buzzwords and scary things like breach and encryptions and exploited and phishing and spearing and all of these different terms. We'll cover some of them, but really it's hard to know where to start with that many questions and those many things to be concerned about. So we want to do a good job today of kind of breaking some of these things down and helping people understand how to put that first foot forward and where that gets you. So kind of plot that destination and help you through that path. And it's hard when you can't really boil the ocean. Certainly you could throw a bunch of money at it and start to cover everything, but there are some prerequisites to kind of getting onto the path. So it's important to kind of know where you can start and what is the low-hanging fruit, both from a monetary standpoint, but also an implementation standpoint, like what can you do quickly and easily to build on, to have a framework to increase and improve your security posture. And I like to take a little bit of time to just kind of back up a little bit and talk about maybe where this has come from. Traditionally, what I think some folks may have thought cybersecurity or cyber criminals look like was this no-face hooded criminal in a basement somewhere doing malicious activities and trying to hack computers. That may have been the case quite some time ago, where you would get a virus infection and the worst case scenario was a lot of pop-ups and you couldn't get rid of them and you kind of messed your computer up. That is not really what's happening any longer. It's far more sophisticated. The goal of a cyber attack now more than ever is to get money. And the success around getting money for these cyber criminals has been really effective. They've had, unfortunately, a great deal of success. So now it's become really well funded. So what we thought was this hooded bad actor, no face person in a basement, in reality looks a lot more like this in today's day and age. So full on call centers with several hundred employees in some cases operating out of, another country where we cannot police them. And they get up every morning and go to work and try to break into our systems. And they're very good at it. And they have teams of people, right? Some of these organizations are much bigger and sophisticated and better funded than some of the businesses here that they're trying to attack. So in some cases, oddly enough, they have a help desk. They want to make sure they can help you navigate their process if they've encrypted your data. So they want to help you set up a Bitcoin account. And if they've done a good job and they've gotten you to pay them, then they'll even ask you for a rating. How was your experience in paying us the money to get your data back? It's kind of comical in a degree or a sense, right, that they have all of these things, but it's pretty scary that it's that sophisticated. So I just want to take a moment to talk about continuing down this path of evolution. There's an organization called Maze Ransomware, and really the goal for them as an organization, for talking about these sophisticated criminals, is to encrypt all the files on your network or your hard drive, right, to get to your backups, and then demand a ransom to recover those files. It's one of the most common things that's happening in today's day and age. It's why we try to protect servers and do so much with backups and recovery, et cetera. Because then you have a place to start over from, and if you have a good recovery time objective and recovery point objective, we can recover quickly into a recent point in time. However, this is what we're dealing with now. This is a recent type of attack that started to kind of show its face in the last quarter, double extortion ransomware. So it's a tactic that emerged at late 2019, Q1 of 2020, so fairly new, but they're taking it one step further. So if they get your data and they're holding it hostage, and let's just say, hey, I have a backup, we're good to go. We're not going to pay these people. We can just kick them out of our system, tighten everything down on the network, make sure that there's no holes back in, and we can spin everything back up from our last known backup. We're all good to go, right? Well, if you don't pay them, in some cases, they're demanding that if you don't pay them, they're going to start to leak and release your data to the dark web in some instances. So it's almost like if you watch any bank robbery movie, if you don't give us our demands, we're going to start taking hostages, and we're going to do one at a time. So they'll release a little bit of your data and kind of show that they are not bluffing. So at some point in this presentation, Shane will talk about data loss protection. And you have your company's data that you use to run your company and files and things like that. However, what about your employees' data, personal identification information, social security numbers, bank statements, checking accounts, things like that? In addition to that, your clients' information and data. So we're going to talk a little bit about how you can protect those things too, as this starts to rear its head. It becomes a little bit more scary. So the perimeter of defense needs to be tightened up dramatically, because even if you can restore effectively, successfully, quickly, this is a whole nother paradigm, right? So very scary. And we do have an example of this happening here in Milwaukee, a local business called CivicSmart. They're a parking meter vendor. So really it lets people pay for parking via their app on a mobile device that helps them find parking spots, et cetera. But they're very closely tied to some government entities through public works and things like that, which is how we came to find this story. A lot of these attacks that are happening aren't publicized because they're privately held companies. So some examples that we have later on are from the public sector, government entities, but this one is the private sector. But because they touched the public sector, there was some information we could get from this press release. According to the initial reports, the leaked data included employee records, bank statements, credit card numbers of customers, and even contracts with cities and parking garage vendors. So it was actually the organization that I just referenced, Maze Ransomware, and they did deploy a double extortion. The company quietly went about their business, didn't notify anybody that they had been exploited or hacked. They did pay the ransom, but it's unknown if the data was leaked or not. and it was just a text file. So it wasn't even a lot of data. It was like 159 gigabytes, which isn't a lot, but as a text file, there's enough stuff that was on there that was going to cause a problem for them. So it's a scary landscape. We're not trying to instill a whole bunch of fear or anything like that. We're just trying to set the tone for the reality of what we're dealing with. And for today's purpose, the anatomy of an attack is something we're going to cover, and we're going to try to plot the points insofar as what you can do at certain stages of an attack. And really, we're going to focus on the ransomware attack, which is why I have that horrible yellow highlight over that. Another type of attack that they're closely related is social engineering, but we've done a webinar on that, and we really helped explain how to identify an attacker. So, I think Ryan is in the background. He can post a link to that content on the QA here so everybody can get to it at some point, and we can also put it in a follow-up email to help people identify malicious emails and prevent social engineering being a path in. But for today's purposes, we're going to focus on the ransomware side of things more so. And to do that, what SWICKtech kind of started to apply for our methodology as we get into this secret sauce is something called the Capability Maturity Model Integration, which in short is the CMMI model. That's what you'll hear me call it throughout today's presentation. CMMI is a proven set of global best practices, and it drives business performance throughout building and benchmarking key capabilities. So this is a model that exists across the globe for many use cases. We've tried to do our best to apply this mode or this model to cybersecurity. So if we look at this slide here, level 1, some companies do still sit here, unfortunately. It's really process is unpredictable and poorly controlled, so very reactive. No one really knows what's going on. As you start to kind of climb up to the higher levels, you're defining some processes for projects, but you're still pretty reactive. And you kind of get the gist of it as you go up here. Now you're getting some more processes that are characterized, documented. You're starting to get more proactive in defending yourself in certain areas. And level 4, it's measured and controlled. There's checks and balances in place. So you're not just running a backup and wondering, I think it's working. Someone verified that that backup did what it was supposed to do, and it's been tested and audited, and we know that we can, restore it to this point in this amount of time because it's tested and verified. That's more of a level 4. And then level 5 is almost unattainable to a degree, but level 5 is really optimizing all of the levels below it. It's a continuous improvement process. So Apple would be a great example of someone that's achieving level 5 and continuing to try to hit that moving target. If we look at the businesses throughout the world, very few are at level 5. Very few are world-class. Most commonly, we're seeing folks at a 1 and a 2 or between a 2 and a 3. So don't be alarmed if you're like, whoa, Eric, I'm not, how do I get to level 5? It's going to take a significant investment, some time and some work to really get to a hyper secure place. And, if we're talking about this particular model. And if we talk about the anatomy of a cyber attack, this is an okay image of showing, just trying to showcase how complex it can be. It's not linear in nature, but we're going to try, for the sake of this presentation, to break it down in a linear fashion so we can help identify what types of tools can stop attacks at what stage in their attack. So this particular graph is really showing how long that actor might actually be in your network before they even do anything. In some cases, that's up to 99 days before they detonate and actually start causing some damage. They're just going to sit in here and start laterally moving about the network, giving themselves more privilege to things, adding rules and things like that. So emails won't be notifying people if someone's saying, hey, you've been hacked. Maybe you won't even see that email because they've set a rule to change that. So it is complex. These attacks can kind of come into your environment at all sorts of different corners and cracks and crevices. It's not always going to be, from one point to the next incrementally. So just some things to call out there. And if we look at the timeline of that cyber attack and apply that to our CMMI model, you'll notice here we have our level 1's not even on this chart to begin with. We started at level 2, and you'll notice, well, Eric, why is level 2 at the beginning and the end? Again, it's because it's very complex. It's not perfectly linear, but we will spend some time, and Shane will highlight the specific tools and tooling and software features that we're using at these various levels here. So to get started with the model itself, again, if we're talking about level 1, we're going to start there. So there's really no security in place. You're not really sure what's going on. Maybe you have antivirus or something, but very reactive in nature. And again, I just am going to throw this slide in here throughout as a reminder so we know where we are. Level 1, process unpredictable, poorly controlled, and reactive. So basically, I think we're past the point of rebooting. It's just chaos, right, to some degree. Maybe you've just never really given IT the TLC that it could use for whatever reasons, like, other parts of the business were more of your focus for growth or what have you. It's okay, we see that it's common, and we're here to help. The example I have for level 1 is a local business that I got to meet with in the area, in the greater Milwaukee metro area. Small company, about 25 employees. They had a crypto attack, and the criminals wanted 5 figures to return their data. And so by the time we got involved at SWICKtech, it was kind of like putting together a murder scene, like what happened at what time, et cetera. So we really had to put our detective hat on and investigate and try to figure out what really happened. But from what our engineers could discern, there were quite a few security holes. There wasn't just one, there were many. So it was likely, from what we could tell, a malicious email that was sent that looked like it was from one of their customers or vendors. So an employee clicked on it thinking it was the same old person that they're normally talking to. And when they clicked on that, malware was deployed and infected their server. So at that point, their data was encrypted. And it was a 50-50 dice roll whether or not they would get that data back based on their previous vendor that was helping them with their backup. It turned out okay, we did get it back, we didn't have to pay ransomware, and then we went to work patching up those security holes and then securing their network and making sure those bad actors didn't have a way back in. So, what does that look like in terms of the impact to that business? They were unable to access their email, so the folks in the front office that were administrative and client facing, they had to use their personal Gmail accounts to email everybody. Everything that they were doing with the business was running on that single server. So it wasn't virtualized, it was all just one unit. So it kind of shut everything down and brought it to a halt. All the files were encrypted, so they couldn't access their client list. They couldn't send out bids. It was not pretty, and it took, if I remember, about 2 days to recall or to actually remedy that. So not pretty, just not pretty at all. And if we look at the timeline of an attack, again, level 1's not on here, so they had some work to do. If we start to level up and go to level 2, now we're implementing things like antivirus software. We're putting that in place to detect and remove software from viruses. Additionally, email filtering is enabled to filter and scan messages to protect against potentially dangerous spam, imposters, and things of that nature. So again, where's level 2 on this spectrum? Processes are characterized for projects, and it's often reactive. And the capability. Sorry, I'm jumping ahead to my next slide before I get there. Silly meme, forget the basics, you should not. And this is where I'll finally let Shane talk and talk about some of the tooling that's being used at level 2 when we talk about patching, antivirus, and email filtering. Thank you, Shane.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. So excited to chat about these with you guys today. Level 2, like Eric said, is kind of that first step, those basics, that baseline that you need to be at. Any IT department or IT service provider, if you ask them about some of these, are you using Windows patching? Do you have an antivirus solution? The answer should pretty much always be yes. I've got those things in place. So I'm just going to go through a little bit about some of what these mean to a business, as well as why they're important and how you should be managing them. So first one up, Windows patching. It's a pretty simple concept, right? So all you need to do is make sure your computers are getting updates. Well, that's not all of it. So some updates can break computers. You don't want to have your computer broken in the middle of a business day or during the week, etc. So the idea here is not only are you patching your computers, but in a business setting, it's super important to ensure that you are appropriately managing updates so that you have a way to deploy them, at the right time for your business. Maybe that's in the evenings or over weekends. And then if something does go wrong, you have a way to roll back and or just skip an update or wait until that's fixed so that it doesn't disrupt your business. So it's important that you're managing those patches. Second one here is antivirus, right? So antivirus software is very common. It's more of an older security technique, but it's still really important. It is a line of defense to have on your computer, and it can protect you from a lot of basic threats like unwanted programs and malware that could get onto your computer. Every computer in a business environment should have a managed antivirus solution. So across the board, every computer should have the same antivirus software on them. And then that way you can ensure that they're all being correctly protected the same way. And oftentimes, if you're managing your antivirus, there'll be ways to make exceptions for things like your line of business applications and stuff. Again, so that your business can still run, but you're also protected. And then the third one here, email filtering. There are a lot of spam and email filtering platforms available out there. Later on, we'll talk more about one that we use and some of the features and settings that we dig into to help clients get up to a level 4. But at level 2, it's really just, do you even have an email filtering solution? Is it turned on and at least filtering some of the spam that's coming into your environment to help limit the amount of opportunities that a bad actor has to attack one of your employees and get information or data or their credentials?
Shane, that was great. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, Eric. And so here, I'll hand it off to you for level 3, Eric, but just to show on this next slide, timeline of a cyber attack, these are a couple of common spots where some of those level 2 items will help you, right? So if you've got email filtering, you might not even receive some of those malicious emails. And then toward the end there, if someone's account does get compromised and some malicious software is installed on their computer, hopefully before the bad actor can even take any action, the antivirus solution will see and remove that malware.
Cool. And the one thing that's like a different shade of gray is training. That's a very important piece that, we didn't hit on just yet. We talk about social engineering. That's where a lot of the training comes into play there. So I know, again, that's not a path that we're really talking about today, but it is important to note that that's one that's continuous and should really span the whole breadth of the cyber attack, because at any point in that, you can train people to avoid some of these things and really teach them what to look out for, and then help them with the tools to take from there. Yeah, as we march on, basic security, as we get to number 3, again, a lot of the folks that we encounter, by and large, are living between a 2 and a 3, and then we're helping a lot of folks get from that 2 to a 3 or that 3 to a 4. And some might have some from one category, but not another. It just really depends. Everyone's at different stages in this. So systems that are in place for verifying a user's identity using multi-factor authentication, something that we're going to talk about in detail here, requires multiple credentials before allowing access to sensitive data. And then as well as secure password management system that could be in place. So those are some of the things that we do at level 3 that have gained a lot of traction, that are low-hanging fruit, and they're not silver bullets, but they can make a very large dent in minimizing that that threat that's out there. And so 3 processes are characterized for the organization, and we're being proactive. So now we're doing some things that are proactive. And I just want to stress, as I take a stop here for a moment, that the people side of this and the training is almost as equal as the importance of some of the physical hardware and software tooling that you can put in place. So again, the training really is a critical piece of this that we're just not really diving that deep into. And don't forget that these attacks are complicated. They are complex in nature. There's a lot happening before you're ever even going to see it, and they can come in at any place. Another fun meme, if you could start using MFA, that would be great. One of my favorite movies of all time. It doesn't matter how many times I've seen it, I just like to keep, every time it's on, I'll just watch it. It doesn't matter. It's kind of like Christmas Vacation, but not. So what is multi-factor authentication, also known as MFA? Before I get into that definition, there's also 2FA, which stands for two-factor authentication. Then we have multi-factor authentication. There's also something called adaptive multi-factor authentication. So there's things like authenticator apps that can make the process really easy, or sometimes just a simple push notification can be used. The multi-factor authentication is 3 things that comprises that. So knowledge factors, possession factors, and biometric factors. So something that I know, like my password, something that I have, like my phone, and then the biometric factor. Most modern smartphones are going to have a fingerprint reader or a face reader, something like that. So kind of like something that you are. These are 3 things that, a bad actor might possess one of them, but likely not all 3, right? So that's a major way you can throw off a lot of attacks. And some of the, there's far more examples than we have here, but just for sake of showing what type of examples MFA is going to stop an attack, would be a phishing attack. So if someone is sending an email to a victim and that attacker collects that victim's credentials because they clicked on it, they put their username and password in thinking they were logging into something maybe they weren't. That victim clicks on the email and goes to the phishing website. They've acquired that. That attacker then is, when they go to log in, is prompted with an MFA question or fingerprint or face scan, and at that point, you as the victim, I guess in this case, will be notified or asked on your cell phone, did you try to log in, approve, or deny? And if you didn't do that, and you would know that you hadn't, you just say deny, and now they've been stopped, right? So very simple kind of way to stop an attack. There's additional types of attacks. Brute force attack is when someone's trying to, a bad actor is collecting some stolen login credentials. Maybe they're getting that from the dark web, and then they're taking that information, running it through some sort of algorithm, and they're finding these bots to, match a password with a username or what have you. Again, even when they get that information, whether they got it through a brute force or through a social engineering attack, if they go to log in, MFA will stop that type of attack. So it's just, again, a very effective tool that's really easy to do. You've probably been exposed to it from your bank. I don't think you can have a bank account online checking without at least 2FA in place, but certainly MFA. And we recommend personally putting it on your LinkedIn, your Facebook accounts, Amazon, a lot of places that you frequent as a consumer. You should put it there also. It's very easy to turn on, and I think we even have some tutorials for that as well. So man-in-the-middle attack is maybe just a little bit more complex. It definitely sounds scarier, but again, you're going to end up with the same result. They're going to try to gain access by stealing some credentials. If you're at a coffee shop, perhaps, and they can log into your system through the network, they try to grab your credentials because you've typed it in. Again, we know where this is going. They can't access it, right? So in terms of where to apply MFA as a business, certainly if you're running a VPN connection, put it there. Anything with accounting, put it there. So if that's your QuickBooks, your Sage, whatever you're using, Microsoft Dynamics, protect that information, and additionally email. So it's very easy to turn on for like Office 365, Gmail. You want to protect that stuff so someone can't get in there.
Yeah, Eric, just to call out on that accounting piece too, a lot of times banks will have this enforced. So you probably have already seen it, right? If you have a bank account with your accounting team, oftentimes they'll have SMS enabled already where they'll send a text message to you. That's very similar, right? That's a two-factor authentication method. So make sure if for some reason your bank or credit union doesn't have that turned on, that you're enabling it there as well.
Great point. This is a funny one now because we've done this presentation before, and when we were kind of rebuilding it and revising it, we left this slide as is, but I'm going to, kind of add to it. So if you really had to pick a place to start and you couldn't do everybody, you would start with your decision makers. You want to protect decisions. So if you think about social engineering, if the CFO of a company is someone that's approving payments to be gone out to vendors, if someone spoofs their account and gets access to them, now that actor is in control of kind of faking that decision, right? So they could approve a wire transfer theoretically, and this happens. We've heard of the examples, we've seen the examples. We work closely with some banks on cybersecurity, and we've heard anecdotes from the FBI when we did this presentation last time with R&R Insurance. So it's very doable and possible, and it's close to home, believe it or not. It's just not reported on that often. And then financial controllers is the other one. So again, protecting decisions and protecting money. However, today that statement is everyone should have it. Everyone in your organization, protect the social media accounts, protect the business development, protect customer service, protect everybody, because there's so many pathways in to these bad actors. They're going to take anything they can get. Look, they're casting a wide net and they're looking for holes. So they're not necessarily targeting you per se, but if they find a weakness, they're going to exploit it. They have the tools and the manpower and the money to do it. So it's up to you to protect yourself as best you can. And this is just such a great tool that we can't hammer it enough. Put MFA on it, and everybody should have it. So I'll get off the soapbox. And we can move on. There was an example of a ransomware attack in Racine and Oshkosh. So two separate cases, both related back to Russian hackers. unknown if like what the correlation was completely, but they could have been stealing data for months. And again, this one was reported on because it was in the public sector, so they have to report it. Russian hackers were collecting data for many months before the ransomware even had struck, right? So they're sitting in that network watching. So since March of 2019 in Racine and September of 2018 in Oshkosh, no evidence again that they were correlated, but both were compromised within a week. So seems kind of fishy. The Racine mayor refused, you may have seen this on the news, you might remember it wasn't that long ago, but the Racine mayor refused to pay. 700 employees were knocked offline. Fortunately, they did have insurance. The backed up data was not breached, but there still isn't 100% clear as to how exactly the malware got in there into the Racine network, but they believe that a staff member unwittingly clicked on a bad link or opened a malicious attack in the email. And so when we get to some of the more software tooling, this is going to be an important thing to remember, right? So at that point, it allowed that ransomware program to run, and they got exploited that way. If we look at Oshkosh, their attack originated in Russia too, but not the Russian government. They believe to be an email attachment with malware. So someone clicked an attachment. Most folks seem to know to not click attachments in emails these days if you're not sure it's coming from, but that social engineering side of it makes it pretty tricky to tell if it's coming from a known source. But bills had to be paid in person at the City Hall cybersecurity consulting firm. I'm just reading some of the information from that story. MCSoft says ransomware hit almost 1,000 government agencies, educational establishments, and healthcare providers in the U.S. last year. So it cost more than $7 billion in totality to look at that. And for this particular case, for these two, it took 2 weeks to get back to normal. 2 weeks. As a business, like we've all just been through Corona and COVID, and we're only now starting to emerge from that. It's a long time, and it would be really hard to withstand that blow in the midst of everything that has just been happening too. So again, protecting yourself is paramount. So looking at that, we kind of cover some of this information already. 700 employees were knocked offline. Fortunately, they had some insurance. Took 2 weeks to get back to normal, and it was really both were linked back to someone clicking something. So it goes back to that human side of things being the last line of defense and training people to not click on these things and how to identify them. You'd be surprised how far a little bit of training will go for people. So on that timeline, Shane, maybe you can speak to how that could have been prevented on the tooling side between this slide and the next one. You can dive into some of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Eric. So like we said before, level 3, a big part of that is multi-factor authentication. So you can see on this timeline here, in the middle of a cyber attack, at any point when the attacker gets those credentials and goes to try and log into that person's email or their bank account, etc., if you have multi-factor authentication turned on, it's going to block that and stop that attack in its tracks. So now, just to pull back the curtain a little bit for you guys, we want to talk through a few of the tools we use for level 3 to help our clients get to a safer place with level 3. Excuse me. We kind of mentioned it already, but level 3 is really all about helping your users use these tools to better protect themselves. So I'm just going to go through the list here and talk about each ones that we use. The first one up is multi-factor authentication for your Microsoft Office 365 accounts. So a lot of businesses nowadays use Microsoft Office 365 for their email. You may have seen our other webinars about Microsoft Teams. There's all kinds of great tools and collaboration features in that environment. But it's also a very robust space, right? If you have email access and access to files and things, it should be protected with something like multi-factor authentication. And so this should be turned on globally. There's a way with certain licensing to set a policy across your entire environment that no matter how many users you have, and if you create new users, MFA is always enforced for everybody. It's going to be super easy to use. We mentioned the Authenticator app earlier. Microsoft has a built-in Microsoft Authenticator app that you can install on Android or iPhone. And it even works with push notifications. So you don't need a code or anything to enter. It's just gonna, every time you sign in from a different device with your credentials, it's gonna send you a notification to your phone and say, hey, do you approve this sign in? And if you don't, if you deny it because it wasn't you, that's gonna be you stopping someone, and you're gonna know you can go change your password and protect your account. The second one up here, VPN multi-factor authentication. So another big area that we like to turn MFA on for is your VPN or your private network. This is a tool that a lot of companies use to access their location, their network, from other sites, right? So from home, you can VPN into the office to get access to files and other resources in your environment. Through using Microsoft Office 365, and depending upon the firewall that you're using, you can enable multi-factor authentication to be very similar to your Microsoft Office 365 environment. And so now when you go in to log into your VPN, it's going to do that same thing. It's going to send you that push notification or a code prompt, depending upon your setup, when you sign into the environment each time, and you're going to go ahead and approve it if it's you and deny it if it's not, right? So simple concept, but super important, super easy to use, and super helpful to stop those attacks. And then the third one here, Passportal Password Vault. This is the tool we use for password vaults. There's other ones out there. Some common ones you might know of are LastPass or Dashlane. And really, all of these are going to offer a type of enterprise password vault. So you may be familiar with using a password vault for yourself. Rather than using the same password for multiple accounts or remembering your passwords, you can store uniquely generated passwords, so random strings of characters and numbers and letters that you then can sign into your accounts with. You'll go to your password app or your password vault and grab those passwords. So now you don't even need to know any of your passwords in order to get into your accounts. So a couple of things this does, right? It helps you make your passwords more unique for each account, so that you're not using the same password across multiple accounts. So if one password does get compromised, now that person doesn't have access to everything. And then with an enterprise level password vault, you're also going to be able to set up different shared groups and shared passwords. So for example, if you have maybe some social and media accounts for your business, now multiple people on your marketing or business development team can have access to that same password, but it's still secure and unique, and they don't all know that that password is password 1234 or something simple that they can remember.
Good job. Yeah. There's another point I was going to make there, I think, with the social media side of things and just having teams have access to that. But you did say to put MFA in front of the password vault, right?
Yes, absolutely. You should definitely have MFA on your password vault. And really, your password vault, obviously you'll need a password and your multi-factor authentication to get into. So it's important that that password be something very strong and not necessarily unique, but unusual. So not just an easy password. Usually you'll use like a passphrase or something a bit more complex that's not personal or directly related to you in nature, but is still something that you'll be able to remember so you can get in, but it's not readily available information.
Greater than 16 characters, is that if you shoot for a passphrase, that's where you should be?
Yeah, I think that's good. 16 characters. Oftentimes people can use like random words with spaces in between them and stuff like that. Any of those options are going to be great to help you secure that password vault.
Cool. Like, I love SWICKtech webinars, exclamation point. That might not be enough. Okay. Looking at level 4, as we continue to climb here, we're really elevating our security, and we're adding some advanced email signatures and encryption methods to verify email authenticity. So the person that is sending email, we verify that they are indeed the person sending that email, so we're not being spoofed. And so ensuring those policies are authorized and certain other accounts can send on your behalf. So if you're integrated with like MailChimp or something like that, you need to make sure that they have the permissions to send on your behalf from your domain at whatever your domain name is, right, at SWICKtech.com. So if we're using MailChimp, we don't want someone else to spin up a MailChimp account and then start sending on our behalf, or we have to verify there's some things that happen technically to make that happen. It's a very important step, a little bit more complex in nature, but again, now we're measuring things and we're controlling the environment of things. So a lot of these have to be built on top of each other to get to this point. And Shane, this is a fun one for you. Look at all these tools here.
Yeah, level 4 is super exciting, Eric. This is where we're getting away from the user a little bit and a little bit more into different tools and features that you can light up in your environment to protect your data and know when it's being accessed incorrectly, or making sure that emails are going to the right place. So I'm going to walk through each one of these. We'll just start top left and move across the screen here. So Exchange Online Protection, that's the email filtering service that we use here at SWICKtech for a lot of our clients. And there's a lot of additional features that you can turn on, and it helps you understand, and it's kind of it has a learning algorithm to it, right? So it's going to know as people mark more and more emails as spam, it's going to improve over time and build kind of a bigger composite database to help it know and understand what emails are spam. And then on top of that, there's a lot of policies that your administrators in your environment can kind of tweak and change to provide you with the right level of spam filtering for your environment, right? So this is a balance. You set it too high, and then you might not be getting important business emails. We don't want to do that, but if you set it too low, now your staff is getting all kinds of spam and possibly clicking on things, entering in their passwords, and their accounts could be compromised. So this Exchange Online Protection is inbound and outbound spam protection. It's also going to detect like bulk mail situations. So if someone's account does get compromised and they start sending out bulk mail, it's going to stop that and alert you. And then, of course, they keep track of different block lists and things like that. So if someone's email address is on a block list and they try and send your company email, you're not going to receive that. It'll be filtered out so that you can kind of ignore that noise. So moving along the list here, we have advanced threat protection. This is real-time monitoring in your environment. So this is a layer on top of Exchange Online Protection. And this is specifically as a feature in Microsoft 365, but it offers the ability to scan the contents of email and investigate those links and/or attachments. So there's tools in here to make links and attachments safe. So it's going to scan a link. If it finds that that's a malicious link, when you go to click on it, it's going to take you to an internal website instead of actually sending you to that malicious site. And it's going to warn you, hey, the link you just clicked on was malicious. You're good, like we covered it, but you can't go to that website. And then very similar with attachments, they have a way to make to detect malware in attachments, and there's all different kinds of settings you can tweak for this safe attachments feature, but you can set it to track the malware if it's detected in an attachment. You can outright block the email or just remove the attachments. There's all different ways that you can protect yourself from malicious attachments that are sent from outside the organization.
So that goes back to that example we just talked about, moments ago, that's a really powerful tool, right? The ATP, Advanced Threat Protection.
Yeah, it's even the stuff that might get through, it's gonna scan and see that it's malicious and stop it from getting all the way to the end user. So it's super powerful. And then next one here, data loss prevention. So again, this is specifically in Microsoft 365, but depending upon your environment, there's other tools available to you for the concept of data loss prevention. This one it's big. It's got a lot of different pieces here. So I'm going to go through some of them. I'm not going to touch on everything you can do with data loss prevention, but I'll just kind of mention some examples here. So you can identify sensitive information in your environment. So that means your emails, your files, if you store files in your SharePoint or Teams environment or OneDrive, all of those spaces. It can, for example, identify any documents containing credit card numbers. And if it's stored in your OneDrive for Business, you can monitor that and make sure that only certain people or sites have access to that information. And then it also is designed to prevent the accidental sharing of sensitive information. So good example here is you can identify any document or email containing a health record. And if that's shared with someone outside of your organization, it's going to automatically block the access to that document. So even if someone on your team accidentally shares a file with proprietary information or a health record or something like that in it, this tool can sense that and block it before someone outside of your organization even gets access to that data. And then you can also set it to monitor and protect sensitive information on the different desktop apps like Word, Excel, PowerPoint, as well as your Office 365 environment. There's reports and stuff that you can run with DLP too, so you can kind of see what different files and information people within your organization are accessing and sharing or downloading, things like that, to protect against something getting out that you don't want, or someone getting access to something that you don't want them to have access to. Again, that data loss prevention concept is, it's huge, right? So there's a ton of different settings and features and policies that you can go in and light up. That's going to be very specific to your organization, and it's going to depend on the data that you have and how sensitive it is and how you want to protect it. So keep that in mind as you start to explore that tool. It can do a lot of cool stuff. And then last one here for level 4, these are just a bit more powerful email security features. So SPF, Sender Policy Framework, is the first one there. This is a piece that's designed to detect forgery in sent email addresses. So it helps you tell the internet where authorized mail should be coming from for your domain. So like for us, SWICKtech.com, and the email addresses associated with that domain. So you're gonna be able to set flags and tell it, yes, MailChimp is allowed to send email on my behalf, or maybe they're not, things like that. And then DKIM, the next one there, domain keys identified mail. So this adds a digital signature to confirm an email came from the domain it says it's coming from. So this is a little bit different. It's a bit more technical than the sender policy framework I just mentioned, but it's just another layer to make sure that the emails coming from your domain are actually coming from you. And then DMARC kind of layers on top of both that SPF and DKIM. So the idea with DMARC, which is Domain Message Authentication Reporting and Conformance, is that it builds on top of those and helps determine what happens if something fails authentication. So you can say, hey, if someone's sending me email and their SPF record is wrong and they don't have it signed with DKIM, just throw it out. I don't even want to see those emails. Or you can let them pass through. It's kind of up to you. You have to tweak those settings to get them just right so that you're getting the right emails that you want, while also filtering out the emails that you don't want.
So that SPF is kind of like a notary seal?
Yeah, a lot of these, or I guess all 3 of these, right? SPF, DKIM, and DMARC, to relate it to something that people are familiar with, like traditional mail. Think about it as like having a notary stamp on an envelope saying like, yeah, I saw this person put this mail together and it's from who they say it's coming from. Nice.
So if you could talk about where this falls on that timeline.
Yeah, so you can see here on the timeline, we've got a couple of spots where we mentioned level 4. With some of those tools in place, you might not even ever see that malicious email that someone sent you. It's going to get blocked, thrown in your spam or your quarantine, never delivered even to your users' mailboxes. So they don't even have a chance to fall for the scam or phishing attack. And then a little bit further down the way there, you'll see malicious links are recognized and denied. So that goes back to what we were talking about with ATP, Advanced Threat Protection. You can turn those features on to scan those links ahead of time. So even if someone gets a malicious email and it gets all the way through into their inbox, they read the email, they think it's legit, but it's been scanned in the background and those links are known to be malicious, they can go ahead and click on those links and it's not going to let them out to that malicious site to enter in their credentials or provide the attacker with any further information.
So with this tooling at level 4, I mean, honestly, based on the reverse engineering of the Racine and Oshkosh attacks, quite frankly, it would have been prevented. Like they wouldn't have even known that this would have come their way. That person wouldn't even have that opportunity to make that mistake.
Yeah, this is going to take a lot of the social engineering situations out of the equation completely. And you've got training highlighted there again. You know, we've hinted at it quite a few times. It also is still very important to let people in on this training process, help them know and learn what these suspicious emails might look like so they can still protect themselves if something does get through all of this technology.
That's great. So folks, I promise there's light at the end of the tunnel. We're almost done with the presentation, a few more slides to go. The light at the end of the tunnel has been turned off due to a ransomware attack. Sorry, the humor, I have to have the humor in here. So it's a joke. We're actually just getting to level 5 here. And I can't hear your laughs, so that's sad for me. But if we're looking at
laugh, Eric, that's why you didn't hear me laugh.
I can laugh at my own jokes. So if we're looking at elite security, now we're getting to some significantly more advanced things. And again, it's not just to say that you have just this stuff at level 5. It's you have everything preceding it from 1 to 4 and level 5 on top of it. So it's kind of like a snowball effect. You're really rolling this thing forward and encompassing all of these things. So Shane's going to talk about the technical things, but at this point now we're focusing on what can we turn up more, and what can we fine tune to focus on the process and improvement of that process and kind of rev that. And as we get to level 5, the tooling here, again, this is a little bit more advanced in some cases, especially the packet management side of it. Packet management, Shane, I'll let you go in just a second, but like think about the Google Play Store or the iTunes App Store, right? Nothing you can download, and iTunes is a much better example of that. It's more of a walled garden approach. If you're going to develop an app right now, today, and you have that ability, you could get it produced on Android probably within a day if it's already done and packaged. But if you try to get that into the iOS App Store, it's got to go through a bunch of process and procedure and people's eyeballs. And it's very rigorous and scrutinizing, and you might get denied. And they might say, no, you need to fix this. This is not secure enough to our standards to be in our store, to be downloaded on our devices, which is why you're seeing that environment ecosystem be far more secure. You can do that stuff with your work environment. But then we'll talk about continuous improvement and geofencing. So sorry to steal your thunder there, Shane. I'll let you have at it.
No, that's all right, Eric. Since you have an iPhone, I knew you were going to make the comment about the Apple App Store. So I appreciate you kind of highlighting that. That's a great example of what package management is, right? So this is really just the general concept of managing and controlling the different software packages that are available to be installed and deployed on your computers or your mobile devices. So, right, you get a computer from Best Buy or wherever you go buy just a home grade PC off the street. That device, you can install anything and everything on it, right? So now if someone gets access to your computer, they can install anything and everything on that device as well. So package management is the idea that you're locking down that computer before the person or the end user ever has that computer, and it's only able to install certain software that you say it should. And oftentimes this is going to come in the form of a portal or an app store style concept where you'll have a handful or a bucket of apps for people to choose from. Maybe a lot of the apps like Microsoft Office and some of your line of business applications are pre-installed when that person gets that computer. But it's really that holistic approach to protecting that environment and only allowing the appropriate software to be installed on a device.
It might be the case that, someone at the front desk doesn't need to access everything. They might only need to access a couple things. So
oftentimes these
can give them what they need, not everything that they could have.
Exactly. Oftentimes these tools will allow you to limit this kind of stuff by device or by person. So you can have people in different groups to say, the accounting staff only get access to these applications, the sales staff only get access to these applications. We utilize Microsoft Endpoint Manager a lot to deploy those types of apps and portals, if you will, and it works really well for us. And then the other one here, geofencing. This is a pretty simple concept, but it's important, right? So you only allow login to certain services or solutions that you have in your environment from a certain geographical location. So a good example of this is your Microsoft Office 365 environment, right? That's so readily available on the web. But maybe if you only have staff in the United States, you can just turn off access to that in other countries. Now, if someone's trying to hack into that account from outside of the United States, they're not even going to be able to log in, even if they have the password. And then, of course, continuous improvement. This process is always evolving, so it's important once you're at a level 5, you're still paying attention to everything new and all of the different technologies that are out there and available to you to
evaluate market leaders, right? Like maybe the antivirus software you have, maybe they've fallen, pace, and they're not as front runner as they were when you selected them 2 years ago. So now it's time to reevaluate. So there should be process and procedure in place to identify those types of evaluations. And then, if a change needs to be made, make the change, right? Don't be married to something because you like their brand. You have to get very objective and agnostic about these things and pick the things that are going to be best for what you're doing, right? Something that SWICKtech does often. So there's, technology evolves very quickly. It's do a lot of things in today's day and age. It's very important for us to be sure we're putting out the best products for our clients. And that involves us not being super attached to anything for those reasons. Some of the takeaways for today's presentation, obviously put MFA on it for everyone. If I didn't beat that drum loud enough, I'm sorry. I could have done a better job there. Put MFA on it. Please consider that. Look into it.
Is that like the Frank's Red Hot of security?
It goes on everything. Yes. I'll spare you all the swear word for their slogan. One thing I didn't mention specifically, but it's kind of inherent throughout this, treat your network as if it's already infected, almost similarly to how we're dealing with COVID. Not to make light of that, but, we're doing a lot of social distancing. We're wearing masks, using hand sanitizer. You're really limiting your physical footprint in certain places in some cases. So again, with your own network, treat it as if it's already infected. And what steps would you take and what things would you do differently if you already had that bad actor just hanging out in your network? Because they might be there, because they might sit there for 100 days before you ever know it. So what are you going to do about it? And just start shifting your thought process and how you're thinking about that stuff. Because unfortunately, the people that tend to take cyber security more seriously are the ones that have already had some sort of impact with it or some sort of issue where they've been infected. The ones that haven't still think it's not going to happen to them, and it's just a matter of time. And cybercrime is big business. We talked about the double extortion and the call center approach. This is some serious, heavy stuff. And if you're not feeling the weight of it in the media, it's because a lot of private entities, they don't want to put out there that they've been infected. That's not good for their reputation, for their vendors, their supply chain, their consumers. You're not going to hear and see a lot of that stuff, but it's happening. So the reports are there from the police and the FBI and the insurance claims that are being filed. It's very prevalent. So just because you're not seeing it and hearing it enough, that's why we want to get out in these webinars to educate everybody that it is an issue and here's some things you can do about it. Some next actions that folks can take. Shane and I have been doing office hours, so if that's something you're interested in, please let us know. We can provide a calendar link and you can book time with us to learn more about various topics, or if we didn't answer your question on today's webinar, you can have that time and opportunity to ask us and we can just go over some things with you on a more one-to-one kind of basis. If you're interested in a dark web scan, that is something we can offer for free from this webinar also to see if your information is out there. We can help with that. And then additionally, if you want a gap analysis, so to speak, to determine kind of where you sit on that CMMI model, are you a 1, are you a 2, are you a little bit of both? We can give you a questionnaire to help inform what that looks like, and from that could be a plan of action for you. So those are some next actions that you could take as a viewer. If you're interested, just let us know. Before we get to full Q&A, and we haven't seen any questions come through yet, but we want to make sure everyone knows there's another webinar on the horizon here. It's new and emerging payment scams. So we're partnering with North Shore Bank, Penny Faust, and we're going to be talking about how to stay ahead of financial fraud. And really, it's a guide for financial leaders. So if you sit in a CFO role or you're in the accounting department, this is a must-attend webinar for you because there's a lot going on. Again, if we talk about what we do here in our seat, it's prevalent, and North Shore Bank has done a great job with these presentations with us. So we'll talk about some of the more recent and relevant cases that she's dealing with on her end and North Shore Bank is dealing with on their end, and we'll kind of combine a little bit about the tech side of things from SWICKtech's perspective. So if anybody has comments or questions, please don't be shy, post them in there, let us know. We'll hang out for just a minute here. If nothing comes through, we'll end the webinar. We'll also deploy a Net Promoter Score survey tomorrow morning to ask you what your thoughts were, so we can always be improving our presentations and giving you what you're looking for. So thank you so much, everybody.
Yeah, thanks everybody for joining. Like Eric said, we'll hang out for a minute or two here. If there do happen to be some questions to pop in, we'll be able to answer those. And then, yeah, if you have, maybe something that's more specific to your organization, feel free to reach out to us directly on those office hours, and we'd be happy to kind of discuss a little bit more about how we can help you with security.